Tonight, we travel back to an age when gods still touched the earth, when storms were not weather, but the anger of heaven, when men's lives were shaped by powers they could not defy. This is the story of Hercules, not the smiling hero carved in marble, not the tamed figure of later songs, but the raw, brutal truth of him. A man born from thunder and betrayal, a man hated from his first breath, a man whose strength was so great it nearly destroyed him. It is not a gentle tale. It is not a safe one. But it is a story that has outlived empires. So, be still for a moment. Draw the air deep into your lungs. Let your body rest, and let the noise of the world slip away. Because before us lies a path walked by a man cursed and chosen, and once you set foot on it, you cannot turn back. This is Hercules. The world shook the night he was conceived. Zeus, lord of Olympus, saw a mortal woman, Alcmene, and his desire burned as fierce as lightning. She was the wife of Amphitryon, noble and just, but Zeus cared nothing for bonds or vows. Cloaked in deception, he came to her bed, disguised as her husband returned from war. From that union a child was conceived, 1 foot in the mortal world, 1 foot on Olympus. But even before he drew breath, that child had an enemy. Hera, queen of the gods, wife to Zeus, had suffered countless betrayals. Yet this one cut deepest, because the child to come was no passing shadow. He was a living mark of her humiliation. She looked upon the unborn boy and saw not an infant, but a threat. Her hatred coiled around him like a snake in the womb. When Alcmene's time came, thunder cracked over Thebes. The moon vanished behind storm clouds. Inside her chamber, incense burned, prayers whispered, the air thick with fear. And then came the cry of a newborn. Not weak, not trembling, but loud, fierce, echoing like the shout of a warrior. They named him Hercules, glory of Hera. It was a bitter trick, a name meant to appease the goddess, to honor the very one who despised him. Later, Rome would call him Hercules, but names did not shield him from fate. That same night, Hera made her move. 2 serpents, larger than men, glided down from the mountains. Their scales glistened like wet stone. Their eyes shone green in the dark. Silent, relentless, they slipped through the chamber door and curled toward the cradle. The midwives shrieked. Alcmene froze. The snakes reared, jaws opening wide, fangs dripping venom, meant for the child's blood. But the infant did not cry. He reached out, 1 hand on each serpent's throat, his tiny arms tensed, muscles straining with impossible strength. The serpents thrashed, coils smashing the cradle, fangs flashing. But the grip of the child only tightened. He crushed them slowly, their hissing dwindling to silence, their bodies falling limp. The baby laughed. When Alcmene and Amphitryon rushed forward, they found him cooing among splintered wood, 2 dead monsters at his side. Word spread through Thebes before the dawn. The child had strangled serpents in his cradle. Priests spoke of destiny. Farmers muttered of curses. Some called him blessed. Others feared him as a portent of doom. But all agreed this was no ordinary child. As the boy grew, so did his strength. He snapped boughs as toys. He lifted oxen across his shoulders. His blows in training shattered his sparring partners. No teacher could restrain him. Yet the shadow of Hera never lifted. She had failed to kill him as an infant, but she did not forgive. She waited, patient, her vengeance sharper than any blade. She knew strength could be matched with force, but a mind, a heart, those could be broken. And so she watched. She wove her curse. The world saw a boy of thunder. She saw only prey. Thus begins the story, not in triumph, not in peace, but in wrath. For Hercules was not simply born to slay monsters. He was born to suffer, born to labor, born to walk a path no man could bear, except him. Thebes thrived beneath Hercules' protection. He had fought wars for its gates, crushed raiders who came from the hills, and scattered armies that dared threaten its walls. In every battle he was a storm, swinging his great club, tearing through men as if they were stalks of wheat. Songs followed him home. Children ran through the marketplace, shouting his name. Farmers whispered of him when their fields came in full. But at home, he was gentler than the songs claimed. In his house, Hercules was not a god's son or a city's champion. He was husband, father, man. His wife, Megara, wise and beautiful, lit the hearth each night. His children climbed his shoulders, tugged at his beard, and clung to his massive hands with laughter. Their voices filled the rooms louder than any feast hall. Hercules believed, for a time, that happiness might finally belong to him. That perhaps Hera, after years of hounding him, had turned her gaze elsewhere. That the queen of Olympus had grown tired of her spite. But Hera never forgot. She had not forgiven him in the cradle. She had not forgiven him in the years of his youth. She had not forgiven him in the wars he fought. He was Zeus's sin made flesh. Every time she looked upon him, she saw the wound carved into her pride. And so she struck. It began with a whisper. The first day, Hercules felt his chest tighten. He shook it off, laughing, telling Megara he had trained too hard, carried too much stone, pulled too many plows. By the second day, the whispers came, low voices at the edge of hearing. Words he could not understand, but that burned in his ears. By the third, the shadows of the house grew strange. The children's laughter grated against him, like metal. Megara's voice bent in his ears, warping into a hiss. His hands trembled as he reached for bread, as if the weight of the world pressed on his shoulders. Thebes had seen Hercules roar in battle, but that night he roared in his own home. The hearth crackled. Megara laid food upon the table. The children played at her feet. Hercules rose from his seat. But what he saw was no family. He saw assassins. He saw twisted shapes, faces distorted into masks of hatred, eyes burning like Hera's. The children's cries sounded like the shrieks of demons. Megara's hands stretched out to him, but in his eyes they were claws. His mind, strong as iron, had been shattered by a goddess's touch. His roar shook the rafters. He seized his bow, arrows flashing into the shadows. A child fell, another. He swept his club through the room, splintering the table, smashing walls, striking again and again. Megara screamed, crying his name, but to his ears it was not his name she called. It was curses, venom, hatred. His sword came down, and then silence. The madness lifted. Hercules stood trembling, sweat pouring from him. His chest heaved, his eyes cleared, and before him lay ruin. The walls painted in blood, the table broken, his children still and cold, his wife fallen, her hand outstretched toward him, lifeless eyes fixed on nothing. The club fell from his grip. He sank to his knees among them, voice breaking, sobs tearing from his throat. He reached for their faces, for Megara's hand, as though touch alone could bring them back. His roar echoed through Thebes once more, but now it was not the cry of a warrior. It was grief itself, louder than thunder, deeper than the earth. The city did not rush to him. The people who had sung his name hid in their homes, whispering. The savior of Thebes had become its horror. Hercules fled. Through the wilderness he wandered, hair torn, clothes ragged, body unbowed but spirit shattered. For days he walked with no food, no fire, stumbling through the dust. He cursed himself, cursed the gods, begged the wind for forgiveness. No answer came. At last he fell before the oracle of Delphi, the mouthpiece of Apollo, where mortals sought truth in shadowed chambers. On his knees, Hercules cried out, "Forgive me, cleanse me, take from me this curse, or take my life." The priestess shrouded in smoke spoke in the god's voice, "You can't wash away this blood. You cannot forget it. You must atone. You will serve, not rule. You will labor, not feast. 12 tasks will be set before you, each impossible. Only through them may your soul find peace, or else perish in the attempt." And so the man who had slain serpents in his cradle now bowed like a slave, not to Hera, not to Thebes, but to fate itself. His first labor waited for him in the hills of Nemea, a beast with hide no blade could pierce, a lion whose roar silenced the earth, and Hercules, broken though he was, would meet it. The hills of Nemea lay silent, where once there had been shepherd songs and the lowing of cattle. Now only ruin remained, houses abandoned, fields left untended, bones scattered in the dirt, gnawed clean. Travellers whispered that the earth itself was cursed, that death walked the slopes beneath a golden mane. King Eurystheus, the cousin who ruled Hercules by the will of the oracle, had given his command, "Slay the lion. Bring me its hide." His words had been smug, certain of Hercules' failure. For this was no ordinary beast. The lion of Nemea was said to be the spawn of Typhon, father of monsters, and Echidna, mother of horrors. Its hide could not be pierced by iron, bronze, or stone. Its claws were sharper than any blade, and its hunger was endless. But Hercules did not turn away. He entered Nemea at dawn, bow across his back, sword at his side, his great club in his hands. The villagers, those few who remained, hid behind their doors as he passed. No one offered bread. No one offered blessing. They looked upon him with a mixture of awe and fear, as though he were as dangerous as the beast he had come to kill. Hercules pressed on into the hills. The air grew still. Even the insects had fled. Trees stood twisted and silent, their bark gouged by claws the size of sickles. The scent of rot hung heavy in the air, a coppery tang of old blood. And then a roar split the silence. It rolled across the hills like thunder, deep and shattering. Birds burst from the trees in a black cloud, fleeing in panic. Hercules stopped, bracing his feet, his grip tightening on the bough. The lion emerged from the shadows of a ravine. It was immense, its shoulders as high as Hercules' chest, its mane thick and shining as molten bronze. Its eyes glowed yellow, unblinking. Its teeth gleamed wet in the dim light. It padded forward with slow, certain steps, its gaze fixed on him as though it had been waiting. Hercules raised his bow. The first arrow sang through the air, striking the beast's flank. It shattered, splintering like kindling. Another. Shafts broke, tips bent, each falling uselessly to the ground. The lion did not flinch. It opened its jaws and roared again, the sound shaking the stones. Then it charged. The ground trembled under its weight. Hercules barely raised his shield before the beast slammed into him, claws raking, teeth snapping. The impact sent him reeling, his shield splintered, his sword jarred loose. He rolled aside as the lion's paw smashed into the earth where he had stood, leaving a crater in the soil. Hercules snatched up his sword, swinging in a wide arc. The blade struck the lion's neck and bent like lead, useless. The beast's hide was as the stories had told, invulnerable. The lion lunged again. Its claws ripped across his shoulder, cutting through flesh though not through bone. Blood ran hot, dripping down his arm. He stumbled back, teeth clenched, pain blazing white in his vision. For the first time since his madness, Hercules felt death close at hand. But fear did not master him. With a shout, he cast aside the broken sword and met the beast with his hands. As it leapt, he caught its mane, muscles straining like cables. The lion's weight drove him back against the wall of a cavern. Its claws tore at his flesh, but he held fast, arms locking tighter and tighter around its throat. The lion thrashed. It raked his sides, its roars echoing like thunder in the stone. But Hercules' strength, forged of God and man, did not falter. He roared in answer, his voice shaking the cavern, and crushed the beast in his grip. Minutes dragged into eternity. The lion's struggles slowed. Its roars broke into wheezes. At last, with one final shudder, the great beast went still. The cavern fell silent. Hercules staggered, chest heaving, his body torn with wounds, blood painting his skin. Yet in his arms lay the corpse of the unkillable. He skinned the lion with his own claws, for no knife could cut its hide. The pelt came away, gleaming gold, heavy as iron. He draped it across his shoulders, the head forming a helm that shadowed his face. Its weight was enormous, but it fit him as though it had always been meant to. When he returned to Eurystheus, dragging the carcass behind him, the king's face went pale. He scrambled back, diving into a bronze jar to hide. His voice muffled as he cried out that henceforth Hercules was never to enter the city again, but to present his trophies from outside the gates. The first labour was complete. But Hera was not finished. For if Hercules' hands could crush a lion, then she would give him a foe whose heads multiplied when struck, whose breath was poison, whose very blood burned like acid. In the swamps of Lerna, the Hydra waited. The air was heavy when Hercules came to Lerna. Gone were the dry hills of Nemea. Here the ground sank beneath his steps. Reeds shivered in stagnant water, and the stench of rot clung to his skin. The swamp stretched in every direction, a labyrinth of mud and pools that swallowed sound. Birds did not sing. No shepherd dared graze his flock here. For in these waters lived the Hydra, a serpent born of monsters, raised in darkness. They whispered it had 9 heads, each large as a man, each lined with fangs dripping venom so strong it could kill with a touch. And worse, when one head was struck down, 2 would rise in its place. Its breath poisoned the air, its blood burned like acid. The land itself sickened around it. This was the second labour. Eurystheus had sent Hercules certain of his death. Hera had smiled from Olympus, pleased at the thought, but Hercules came anyway. He did not come alone. At his side walked Iolaus, his nephew, young but fierce. Unwilling to let his uncle march into a swamp of death without aid, the 2 men pressed deeper into Lerna. The air grew heavier, a choking miasma that clung to their throats. The water grew darker, slick with slime. And then, from beneath the surface, came a ripple, a hiss, then another. The swamp exploded. The Hydra arose. Its body was thick as a ship's mast, scales black and glistening, coiling endlessly from the water. From its trunk sprouted heads, one after another, snapping jaws, glaring eyes, fangs dripping streams of poison. 9 in all. Its central head rose above the rest, larger, more terrible, its hiss echoing like a storm of daggers. The sight would have broken lesser men. Hercules raised his club. The Hydra struck. 9 heads lunged at once, jaws snapping. Hercules swung, his club smashing through skulls. Bone cracked, teeth shattered, blood sprayed black across the swamp. 3 heads fell, and from each stump 2 more burst forth, writhing, shrieking. The monster grew. Its coils surged, wrapping around trees, dragging them down. Its breath choked the air, thick as smoke, burning Hercules' lungs. Still he fought. His arms rose and fell, the club a blur, crushing skulls, breaking spines. Each blow was thunder, each roar a quake. But for every head destroyed, 2 more snapped in its place. The swamp shook with the fury of the growing beast. The labor seemed endless. For the first time, Hercules felt the edge of despair. Iolaus shouted over the din, his eyes wide but burning with resolve. "Fire!" He snatched a torch, plunged it into the reeds, set them alight. The swamp hissed with flame, smoke curling skyward. As Hercules smashed another head, Iolaus pressed the torch to the bleeding stump. The flesh seared. The wound closed. No new heads grew. At once, Hercules understood. Together, they turned the tide. The Hydra shrieked as its heads fell one by one, each stump seared with flame. Hercules roared, muscles straining, arms pounding with unyielding strength. Iolaus leapt from root to root, torch in hand, chasing the beast's thrashing coils, burning each wound shut. The swamp became a battlefield of smoke and fire, water boiling, ash falling like snow. The Hydra writhed, its coils smashing trees, its head snapping in fury, but the circle of flame closed tighter and tighter. At last, only the central head remained, larger, venomous, immortal. Hercules dropped his club, seized the head in both hands. The jaws snapped, venom dripping across his chest, burning his skin. He heaved, muscles bulging, and tore it free with a roar that shook the swamp. The Hydra fell silent, its coils slackened, sliding back into the mire. Hercules buried the immortal head beneath a boulder, trapping it forever. The body he split open, dipping his arrows in its black blood. From that day forward, any wound struck by those arrows would fester with death. But even in triumph, Hera twisted the tale. From Olympus she sent word that Hercules had not fought alone, that his nephew's aid had cheated the purity of the labour. Eurystheus, smug upon his throne, declared it void. The Hydra was slain, but the tally of Hercules' labours remained unchanged. Still, the swamp grew quiet once more. The reeds stood still, the air cleared, and Hercules, blooded and scarred, stood unbowed in the mire, a man who had fought a monster that could not be killed, and killed it anyway. Yet Hera's vengeance had no end. If a beast of many heads could not destroy him, then she would send him to hunt that which could never be caught. Far to the north, swift as an arrow, ran the Ceryneian hind, sacred to Artemis herself. And it was waiting. The blood of the Hydra still stained his club when Eurystheus gave his next command. "Bring me the Ceryneian hind," the king sneered, thinking this task impossible. Alive. This was no ordinary beast. The hind was as sacred to Artemis, goddess of the wild. Its coat gleamed gold, its antlers silver, its hooves swift as the wind. It belonged not to men, but to the forests and mountains, a spirit of speed and grace. To slay it would mean defying the goddess herself, and even Hercules, son of Zeus, knew better than to cross Artemis. And so, Hercules set out. He found the first tracks in the snows of Arcadia, delicate prints pressed into frost, lighter than a bird's wing. He followed them into the pines, but they vanished as suddenly as they appeared. He hunted through valleys and over rivers, but the hind never stayed. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. The hind was always ahead of him, a flash of gold in the distance, a glimmer in the moonlight. His legs ached, his lungs burned, yet he did not stop. For to fail was to return empty-handed, mocked by Eurystheus, denied his atonement. So Hercules pursued through spring, when blossoms opened on the hillsides, through summer, when the sun baked the stones, through autumn, when leaves turned red and gold, through winter, when snow blinded his eyes and froze his breath. A year passed. At last, in the highlands of Serenea, he found it drinking from a stream at dawn. The hind's coat shimmered in the first light, gold as the sun, silver antlers casting pale fire. Its breath rose in soft clouds above the water. For the first time, Hercules saw it still. He notched an arrow, but did not draw. To harm it was forbidden. To frighten it would lose it again. Instead, he crept forward, step by careful step, his massive frame moving with surprising silence. The hind lifted its head. Its eyes caught his, deep, unblinking, untamed. For a heartbeat, time froze. Then it leapt. The chase began anew. Through forests and across rivers, the hind fled swift as the wind. But Hercules, though mighty, was patient. He paced himself, step by step, breath by breath. Hours turned to days, days to weeks. Always the hind, just beyond his reach, its golden coat flashing through the trees. At last, one evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, Hercules loosed a final arrow, not to kill, but to slow. The shaft struck between the beast's hooves, grazing flesh without piercing. The hind stumbled. In a bound, Hercules was upon it. He wrapped his arms around its body, holding tight but careful, restraining it without crushing its spirit. The hind struggled, hooves flashing, antlers striking, but his grip was steady. He had it, alive. But before he could turn back to Mycenae, the forest darkened. From the trees stepped Artemis, huntress of the moon, bow in hand, eyes sharp as steel. At her side walked Apollo, god of the sun, his face stern. The goddess's voice was cold as shadow. You dare lay hands upon what is mine. Hercules bowed his head. For all his strength, he knew the gods could shatter him with a thought. Lady Artemis, he said, I meant no insult. This was no hunt for glory, no theft of what is holy. I am bound to these labours, not by pride, but by curse. If I fail, my soul is lost. Artemis studied him. Her gaze cut like a blade, seeking pride, deceit. She saw none, only grief, only burden. At last, she lowered her bow. Then take it, not as yours, but as a loan. Show it to the man who sent you, and then return it to the wild. Harm it, and not even your father Zeus will shield you from me. Hercules bowed again. As you command. And so he carried the hind, careful as if it were a child, all the long road back to Mycenae. Eurystheus leapt from his throne when he saw it, gaping at the golden coat, the silver antlers. He ordered it locked away, chained as a prize. But Hercules refused. He returned to the forest, released the hind, and watched it vanish into the trees, free once more, swift as a dream. The third labour was done, not with blood, not with slaughter, but with patience, endurance, and respect for the gods. Yet Hera was not satisfied. If Hercules could chase the swiftest of creatures for a year, then let him hunt one whose strength could crush mountains. In the snowy peaks waited the Erymanthian boar, and its roar was already echoing across the land. The mountains of Arcadia rose sharp and white against the winter sky. Winds howled through the peaks, carrying snow in sheets that stung the skin like knives. It was here, among the frozen ridges and black forests, that the Erymanthian boar roamed. The beast was said to be the size of a bull, tusks long as a man's arm. hide thick as armor, rage boundless. Shepherds told tales of it charging into villages, overturning houses, scattering cattle like dust. Hunters who sought it returned only in pieces, if they returned at all. This was the fourth labor: capture the boar alive. And so Hercules climbed into the mountains, cloak wrapped tight, snow crusting in his beard. Each step sank deep, his breath rising in clouds. He moved not as a hunter, but as a storm through the drifts, following the broken trees, the gouged tracks, the bloodstains that marked the boar's passage. At night, he sheltered in a cave, building fires that sputtered against the wind. From the dark came the cries of wolves, the groaning of ice, the endless breath of the mountain. But beneath it all, he heard something deeper, the distant bellow of the boar. It shook the ridges, it echoed through the valleys, each roar a promise of violence. On the third day, Hercules found it. The boar burst from the trees in a spray of snow, massive and terrible. Its bristles stood sharp as spears, its eyes glowed with bloodlust. Tusks jutted from its jaws, dripping froth white with frost. Its breath steamed in the cold, rising like smoke. It saw Hercules and charged. The ground trembled beneath its hooves. Hercules braced his feet. The beast thundered closer, snow exploding in its wake. He leapt aside as the tusks slashed past, the impact tearing a tree from the ground. The boar wheeled, snorting, foam flecking its jaws. Again it came, head low, tusks flashing. Hercules struck with his club, the blow ringing against its skull. The boar staggered, but did not fall. Its hide was too thick, its rage too deep. The fight raged through the snow. Hercules wrestled with it, dodging its tusks, smashing his club into its back, driving it toward the higher peaks. Each clash tore the earth, shook the trees, sent avalanches tumbling down the slopes. But Hercules did not fight to kill. This was not the lion, not the hydra. His task was capture. Higher and higher he drove it, into the ridges where the snow lay deeper, the drifts swallowing its hooves. The boar snorted, shrieked, thrashed, but its fury slowed as the weight of the mountain pressed against it. The snow clutched its legs, dragged at its body. At last, with a roar, Hercules sprang. He seized the beast by its tusks, forcing its head aside, his muscles straining, arms like iron. The boar bellowed, its breath hot and steaming in his face, its hooves tearing at the earth. But Hercules held. Slowly, with a strength no man could match, he forced it down into the snow, pinning it beneath his knee. The boar struggled once more, then stilled, its body shuddering, its breath ragged in the freezing air. It was caught, alive. Hercules bound its legs with chains, hoisted it across his shoulders, and began the long descent down the mountain. Step by step he carried it, the beast thrashing against him, but his grip unyielding. The villagers who had fled their homes saw him emerge from the blizzard, a giant striding through snow with a monster upon his back. Some fell to their knees, others wept, for the terror that had haunted their lives now hung helpless in the hands of one man. When he returned to Mycenae, Eurystheus came out to witness the prize. But when he saw the size of the beast, its tusks gleaming, its body still writhing in fury, his courage broke. He shrieked, turned pale, and fled into a bronze jar, slamming the lid shut. From inside came his muffled voice. "Take it away. Take it away." Hercules laughed once, a short, bitter sound. Then he dragged the beast back into the mountains and released it as the gods commanded. Thus ended the fourth labor, not with slaughter, but with strength bent to control. But Hera's hand was not finished. If the boar could not gore him, then she would bury him in filth. She would send him to a place fouler than any swamp, fouler than any beast, the Augean stables, where the waste of 1,000 cattle had rotted for decades, and no man, no matter how strong, could cleanse them. When Eurystheus heard of Hercules' triumph over the boar, his lip curled in frustration. No lion had killed him, no hydra had poisoned him, no beast of snow had broken him. So the king, guided by Hera's whisper, set forth a new command. Go to Elis. There King Argus keeps stables filled with cattle more numerous than stars. They have not been cleaned for 30 years. Filth has piled high as walls, stinking, festering, crawling with vermin. Clear them in a single day, Hercules, and then return. Fail, and your strength will prove nothing but a curse. Eurystheus smiled, thinking he had at last found the task that would break the son of Zeus. For who would not be shamed to labour knee-deep in dung, not as a warrior, but as a stable boy? But Hercules accepted without complaint. He came to Elis at dawn, the air already thick with stench. From miles away the smell struck him, heavy as a blow. Flies swarmed in black clouds, their droning louder than a war drum. The stables loomed vast, stretching farther than sight, walls buckling beneath the weight of decades of filth. Inside, thousands of cattle shifted and bellowed, their hooves sinking in muck, their hides caked in filth. Rivers of waste trickled across the floor, feeding swamps of rot. Hercules' stomach clenched. For all the monsters he had faced, all the blood and bone he had broken, nothing in his life had reeked so foul. The stench was alive. King Argus came to him, proud and careless, his wealth born from the herds that fouled the land. His robe stank faintly, though he ignored it, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. Clear them, he said, waving a jewelled hand toward the stables. Do it before the sun sets, and I will reward you with 1/10 of my cattle. Hercules met his gaze. Swear it by your gods. Augeas hesitated, but greed overcame him. By the river Alpheus and by Helios who sees all, I swear it. So the pact was made. Hercules set to work. At first he lifted shovel and rake, his great hands moving mountains of filth with ease. Piles rose, steaming in the sun. But for every load he cleared, more remained. The muck was endless, layered year upon year. The air choked him. Sweat ran black down his arms. By midday, he knew the truth. No man, no matter how strong, could finish by hand. But Hercules was not only brawn, he was wit. He walked to the banks of the rivers Alpheus and Peneus, their waters rushing strong from the mountains. He studied their course, their bends, their speed. Then he lifted stone and earth, tearing new channels with his bare hands, gouging paths wide as roads. With a roar, he broke the banks. The rivers surged forward, redirected, crashing into the stables. Water thundered through the halls of filth, churning, sweeping, smashing. The muck broke apart, torrents dragging it out in waves, carrying 30 years of waste into the sea. The stables shook as the flood roared, but the cattle lifted their heads, lowing with relief as clean earth emerged beneath their hooves. By sunset, the stables gleamed. Not a mound remained. Hercules stood soaked and filthy, but the work was done. He turned to Augeas, but Augeas was not a man of honour. When he saw his stables cleansed, shame burned in him. To admit that another had done in one day what he had left undone for decades would ruin his pride. You will have no reward, Augeas spat. You cheated. You used the rivers, not your own hands. Hercules' eyes darkened. His hands clenched on his club. For a heartbeat it seemed he would strike the king where he stood, but instead he turned away, silent, his face set like stone. For the oracle had commanded labour, not vengeance. His task was complete, whether Augeas honoured his word or not. When Hercules returned to Eurystheus, the king scoffed. "It does not count," he declared, echoing Hera's venom. "You used trickery. You did not toil as commanded. This labour is void." Thus 2 of Hercules' victories, the Hydra and the stables, were struck from the list, leaving him bound to more than 10 tasks still. But the filth was gone. The cattle lived clean. The land was healed. And though Hera and Eurystheus mocked him, the people whispered of it as another triumph. For only Hercules could bend rivers to his will. Only Hercules could cleanse rot that had festered for a generation. Yet Hera's fury only deepened. If Hercules could command rivers, let him face a sky filled with wings. If he could drive filth away with water, let him stand beneath a storm of iron feathers. From the marshes of Arcadia came the next terror. The Stymphalian birds, man-eaters with beaks of bronze and wings that cut the air like blades. And they were waiting. The land of Arcadia was thick with forest and swamp, its lakes hidden beneath curtains of mist. But there was one place men dared not go, the marshes of Stymphalus. Once, shepherds had grazed their flocks there. Once, hunters had stalked deer along its banks. But then the birds had come. They were no ordinary birds. They were born of Echidna's brood, monstrous in size. Their feathers tipped with bronze, sharp as razors. Their beaks forged like iron. Their wings cutting the air with deadly force. Their droppings poisoned the ground. Their shrieks drove men mad. When they flocked together, they blotted out the sky. Even the bravest fled Stymphalus. The land rotted, abandoned, and in the heart of that mire, the flock grew fat on carrion and men alike. Eurystheus sent Hercules there with cruel delight. "Clear them from the marshes," the king commanded, his voice dripping venom. "Drive them away, or kill them all. If you can." He thought no man could face a storm of iron wings. He thought Hera's curse would find its mark. But Hercules went without hesitation. The marsh was silent when he arrived. Mist curled thick around the reeds. The water lay black, stagnant, reflecting nothing. No frogs croaked, no fish stirred. Even the wind held its breath. Hercules stepped forward, his boots sinking into mud. Each movement stirred ripples across the water, circles spreading outward. He listened. The silence pressed against his ears, heavy as stone. Then the first shriek split the air. It was sharp, piercing, unnatural, a sound not meant for mortal ears. Then came another, and another. The mist churned, and wings burst forth. The flock rose. Hundreds of birds, their feathers glinting bronze in the pale light. Their eyes burned with hunger. Their beaks clacked like hammers on anvils. The sky darkened beneath their wings. They shrieked as one, the sound splitting the trees, shattering silence into madness. Hercules staggered as the noise assaulted him, his head ninging. Then the first feathers fell. They sliced through the air like arrows, embedding in the ground, sparking against the stone. One cut across his shoulder, carving a line of fire in his flesh. Another buried itself in his shield, quivering with the force of a javelin. The marsh became a storm of metal. Hercules raised his club, smashing at the birds as they swooped. His blows shattered wings, broke bodies, sent them shrieking into the mire. But for every one he struck down, 10 more took its place. They circled, dove, raked his flesh with talons, tore his cloak with their beaks. The air was deafening. Their cries were endless, their feathers falling like rain. For the first time since the Hydra, Hercules realized strength alone would not win this fight. Then he remembered. Athena, goddess of wisdom, had seen him depart Mycenae. She had given him a gift, a pair of bronze castanets forged by Hephaestus, god of fire and craft. Use these, she had said, her voice cool and sharp. Sound will be your weapon, not steel. Drive them into the air, and the birds will scatter. Now Hercules drew them from his pack. He clashed them together. The sound rang out like thunder, louder than the shrieks, sharper than bronze feathers. Again and again he struck them, the noise reverberating across the marsh. The birds faltered, their formation broke. They rose higher, screeching in confusion, wings beating in chaos. Hercules seized the moment. He drew his bow. Arrows tipped with Hydra's venom, and loosed them into the flock. Each shaft struck true, piercing feathers, sinking into flesh. Wherever the poison touched, the birds dropped from the sky, writhing, dying before they struck the ground. Others fled in terror, wheeling away into the distance, vanishing beyond the horizon. At last, silence returned. The marsh lay littered with broken bodies, their bronze feathers glinting in the mud. The black water rippled red with blood. Hercules stood alone, chest heaving, shield cracked, flesh torn, but unbowed. The air cleared. The land breathed again. The Stymphalian birds were no more. But Eurystheus did not rejoice. When Hercules dragged the carcasses to his gates, the king shrank back in disgust, his face pale at the sight of so many slain horrors. Hera whispered in his ear, souring triumph with scorn. It was not labour, but luck, he said. Athena gave you aid. Without her gift, you would have failed. This too I strike from the count. So again, Hercules' victory was tarnished. Again, his burden grew heavier. Still, the marsh was free. Still, men could walk the woods of Arcadia without fear of shrieking death. But Hera's hand moved quickly. If Hercules could command the sky, let him next wrestle with the earth. If he could silence wings, let him seize horns. And so Eurystheus sent him to Crete, to subdue the Cretan bull, a beast of fire and madness, born of Poseidon's rage. Crete shimmered under the Mediterranean sun, its mountains crowned with olive groves, its plains rich with fields. Yet beneath its beauty lay a scar, the path of the bull. This was no common animal. Poseidon, lord of the sea, had once sent the bull from the waves as a gift to King Minos, meant for sacrifice. But Minos, dazzled by its beauty, refused to offer it back. Angered, Poseidon cursed the beast, filling it with fire and frenzy. It tore across the island in madness, its hooves shattering earth, its bellows shaking the walls of Knossos. Crops lay flattened, houses burned, men fled before it, powerless against its divine rage. This was the beast Eurystheus demanded Hercules capture. Alive! When Hercules set foot on Crete, the air itself seemed heavy. The people gathered around him, eyes wide with fear. Some pressed offerings into his hands, bread, wine, charms carved from wood. Others only watched in silence, too broken by terror to hope. It comes with the dawn, a shepherd whispered. Each day it returns. Each day it leaves more ruin. Hercules nodded, saying nothing. At sunrise the bull came. It thundered from the hills, its hide white as salt, gleaming in the morning light. Steam poured from its nostrils, smoke curling from its mouth. Its eyes glowed red, wild with divine fire. When it bellowed, the sound rolled like thunder across the plains. Men scattered. Doors slammed. But Hercules strode forward, club in hand. The bull lowered its head. Its horns shone like polished bronze, sharp enough to pierce stone. Then it charged. The earth split beneath its hooves as it came, faster than any beast should move. Hercules braced himself, but the impact was like a mountain falling. The horns missed by a hand's breadth, ripping through the earth, hurling stones skyward. The bull wheeled, bellowing, its tail lashing like a whip. Hercules swung his club, the blow landing on its flank with a sound like oak striking bronze. The bull staggered, but it did not fall. Again it charged, and again Hercules leapt aside, the horns grazing his skin, tearing furrows in the ground. The battle raged across fields and hills. Villagers watched from afar, their voices hushed, their hearts clutched in terror and awe. The bull was divine rage made flesh. Hercules was mortal, will made iron. At last, as the bull thundered past, Hercules lunged. He seized its horns in both hands, his muscles straining, veins standing out like cords. The beast reared, bellowing, steam and smoke pouring from its mouth. It dragged him through the mud, hooves pounding, tail lashing, but he held fast. Step by step, he forced it down, his feet digging trenches in the earth. The bull fought like fire itself, but Hercules' grip was unyielding. He twisted the horns, forcing the massive head aside. The beast screamed, thrashing, trying to throw him free, but the son of Zeus roared louder. With a final heave, he slammed it to the ground. The earth shook. The bull lay thrashing, its breath hot as a forge, but Hercules pinned it with his weight, his arms locked around its neck. Slowly, its struggles weakened. Its roars turned to groans. At last, the mighty creature lay bound, subdued not by blade or spear, but by sheer will. Hercules dragged the bull to the coast, its body still trembling with rage. A ship waited, its crew pale and silent. With ropes thicker than a man's arm, they bound the beast to the deck. When Hercules returned to Mycenae, Eurystheus came to see the prize. But when the bull bellowed, shaking the very stones, the cowardly king shrieked and hid once more in his bronze jar. "Take it away," he cried, his voice muffled. "Release it far from here." So Hercules set the bull loose upon the plains of Greece. It vanished into the wilderness, a ghost of divine wrath, its fate to one day father the Minotaur, another curse upon Crete. Thus ended the seventh labour. But Hera's malice grew sharper still. If Hercules could subdue a beast of fire, let him face creatures that fed on human flesh. Let him look into eyes mad with hunger, and see whether his strength could silence them. Far to the north, King Diomedes kept mares that devoured men, and their shrieks were already rising on the wind. Beyond Thrace, where the land meets the restless sea, there ruled a man named Diomedes. He was king, but no king of honor. His cruelty was legend. His soldiers plundered villages, his people lived in fear. And in his stables he kept a horror unlike any other. The mares of Diomedes, 4 horses, black as midnight, their eyes burning with madness, their breath hot and reeking of blood. Their mouths foamed not with grass or grain, but with the flesh of men. For Diomedes had fed them not hay, but human bodies, slaves, strangers, enemies. Day by day, bite by bite, their hunger deepened until they could never be sated. They tore flesh from bone with jagged teeth. They trampled men into the dirt. Their shrieks echoed like war cries across the plains. This was the terror Eurystheus sent Hercules to claim. "Bring me the mares," he commanded, smirking. Alive. Hercules came at night. The sea crashed against the shore as he and his companions, loyal men who had followed him through many trials, crept toward the stables. The air was rank with the stench of blood, the ground churned by hooves. From within came the sounds of the mares, snorting, shrieking, tearing at their chains. One of Hercules' men whispered, "These are no horses. They are demons." Hercules said nothing. His jaw was set. He had seen monsters enough to know that sometimes the gods created them, and sometimes men did. They broke open the stable doors. The mares surged out, eyes rolling, teeth snapping. They screamed a sound more human than animal, raw with hunger. One lunged at a soldier, tearing his throat with its teeth, blood spraying across the mud. Another trampled a man, hooves pounding until bone gave way. The camp erupted into chaos. Hercules bellowed, swinging his club, knocking one beast aside. He caught another by its mane, dragging it down, his hands tearing against the wild thrashing of its body. His companions fought desperately, ropes flying, hands bleeding as they tried to subdue the monsters. But the mares were too strong, too savage. They killed as they had been taught to kill, and no mortal hand could soothe them. Then Diomedes came. The king rode upon his chariot, whip in hand, his soldiers behind him. He laughed to see Hercules struggling. "You can't tame them," he shouted. "They know only blood, and they answer only to me." "You will be their next meal, son of Zeus," Hercules roared, casting aside the horse he grappled, and charged the king. Their clash was swift and brutal. Diomedes swung his whip, striking, but Hercules seized him, lifted him from the chariot, and hurled him into the mud. The soldiers faltered. Fear rippled through them. Some fled. Hercules looked down at Diomedes, panting, struggling in his grip, and then he looked at the mares, shrieking, straining at their chains, their mouths frothing with hunger. His eyes hardened. "You made them what they are," Hercules said. "Then let them have you." He dragged Diomedes toward the stables. The king thrashed, screamed, cursed the gods, but Hercules did not listen. He threw the tyrant among his own beasts. The mares fell upon him at once. Their shrieks filled the night as they tore into him, teeth ripping, hooves smashing, the air thick with blood and screams. His cries rose, then broke, then were gone. When at last the frenzy ended, the mares stood panting, their bodies slick with gore. But their madness was gone. The hunger that had driven them for years was quenched. Their eyes grew calmer, their breath steadied. Hercules bound them with chains, leading them like ordinary horses at last. When he returned to Eurystheus, the king turned pale at the sight of the blood-streaked beasts. He cowered in his bronze jar once more, shouting for Hercules to take them away. So Hercules released the mares, some say to the wilds of Olympus, others say to the care of the gods. No man heard of them again. Thus ended the 8th labor, not by killing, not by conquering, but by turning cruelty back upon itself. But Hera was far from finished. If Hercules could tame the hunger of beasts, then she would send him to steal from the very belt of war itself. Far to the east, among the Amazons, there was a queen named Hippolyta, and around her waist lay the girdle of Ares, god of battle. And Hera whispered, "Take it from her, if you can." Far to the east, beyond the Black Sea, lay the land of the Amazons, a nation of warrior women, unmatched in skill and fearlessness. They lived without men, hunting, ruling, and warring as they pleased, their bows singing across the plains, their spears glinting beneath the sun. At their head was Hippolyta, queen and daughter of Ares, god of war. Around her waist she wore the girdle of Ares, a belt wrought of gold and leather, pulsing with divine power, a gift from her father to mark her as leader. It was said, whoever wore it bore the favor of battle itself. This was what Eurystheus demanded. "Bring me the girdle," the king ordered, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Take it from Hippolyta's waist." It was not enough that Hercules had cleansed filth, slain beasts, and captured monsters. Now he was sent across the sea to wrest a sacred token from a queen of warriors. Hera had guided Eurystheus' hand, knowing this would not be a labor of strength alone, but of pride, mistrust, and war. Hercules gathered a small company of heroes and sailed east. The sea carried them through storms and silence, past islands haunted by strange cries, until at last they reached the shores of Themyscira, the Amazon capital. The Amazons came to meet them. They were tall, fierce, their armor gleaming, their spears lifted. But they did not charge. They watched with wary eyes as Hercules stepped ashore. Hippolyta herself came forward. She wore no crown, only a simple helm, but her presence was command enough. The girdle shone at her waist, glowing faintly in the sun. Her gaze met Hercules. "Why do you come here, son of Zeus?" Hercules bowed his head. For once, his voice was not thunder, but measured. "I come not for conquest," he said. "I am bound by curse and command. The king I serve demands your girdle. I ask not for it as plunder, but as gift that my labor may be fulfilled. I will take nothing else, and I will leave in peace." Hippolyta studied him. She saw no deceit, only weariness, only the shadow of grief in his eyes. She was a warrior, and she respected strength. She was a queen, and she knew when pride could bend without breaking. At last, she nodded. "If your need is true," she said, "then take it. Let there be peace between us." And she placed her hand upon the girdle. But Hera was watching. From Olympus, she saw Hercules' path bending toward mercy, his labor fulfilled without blood. Her hatred boiled. No, she would not let him pass so easily. So she descended among the Amazons in disguise, whispering in their ears, "See how your queen speaks with the son of Zeus. See how she hands him the girdle, as if he were her king. Do you not see? He means to take her, to enslave you all, to conquer Themyscira." The whispers spread like fire. Suspicion turned to anger, anger to fury. When Hippolyta reached to unclasp the girdle, the Amazons cried out as one. They charged, spears flashing, arrows whistling, their cries filling the air. The beach erupted in war. Hercules' companions clashed with the Amazons, shields raised against arrows, swords striking spears. Sand turned red with blood. The crash of bronze rang across the shore. Hercules himself fought like a storm. His club shattered shields, his hands tore spears aside. But he did not fight to kill, he fought to survive. The women came at him like waves, fierce, unyielding, their strength no less than any man's. Through the chaos he saw Hippolyta, standing amidst the fray, her eyes wide with fury. Or was it betrayal? Hera's whispers had reached even her. They met in combat. Her spear flashed, her shield slammed against his arm. Hercules roared, striking aside her weapon, gripping her wrist. For a moment they locked, strength against strength, eyes burning. And then, silence. Hippolyta fell. Whether by Hercules' blow or by arrow in the chaos, no tale agrees. Some say he struck her down, others that she was slain by her own in confusion. But when the battle ended, Hippolyta lay lifeless upon the sand, and around her waist was the girdle of Ares. Hercules took it, not with triumph, but with grief. He had not sought her death. He had come for peace, but Hera had twisted it to war. He returned to Eurystheus, the girdle heavy in his hands, his heart heavier still. The king snatched it greedily, his lips curling in triumph. But Hercules turned away, his face shadowed. Another labour complete, another stain upon his soul. Yet Hera's vengeance pressed on. If Hercules could face warriors, let him now face monsters, born of earth itself. Far in the west, beyond the edge of mortal lands, dwelled the giant Geryon, with 3 bodies, 3 heads, and a herd of red cattle. And Hera smiled, for this labour would carry Hercules to the ends of the world. Eurystheus's command was crueler than most. Bring me the red cattle of Geryon. Alive, but these cattle were not the herds of mortal kings. They grazed at the farthest western edge of the earth, where ocean kissed the horizon and the sun sank into the sea. Their herdsman was the giant Geryon, a creature with 3 bodies joined at the waist, 3 heads crowned with fire, 6 arms strong as iron. His cattle were guarded by Eurytion, a herdsman fierce as a wolf, and Orthrus, a 2-headed hound born of Typhon. To reach them, Hercules would have to cross the world itself. He travelled west for months, through deserts where the sun scorched the ground to glass, through mountains that clawed the sky, across rivers swollen with flood, through forests thick with shadow, where eyes glowed in the dark. At every turn, he faced trials. Raiders who sought his life, kings who barred his way, beasts drawn by his scent. But Hercules pressed on, his eyes fixed on the horizon. At last, he reached the place where the sea swallowed the sun. There he built 2 vast pillars upon the straits, one upon Europe, one upon Africa. He set them as markers of his passage, gates between worlds, so that men would know how far he had gone. Later ages would call them the Pillars of Hercules. Beyond them lay the island of Erythea, the home of Geryon. The island was a place of strange colour. The grass shone red as flame. The rocks gleamed crimson in the light. The sea foamed scarlet at its shores. And there, grazing in the fields, were the cattle, their hides red as blood, their horns curved like sickles. Their bellow shook the air. But between Hercules and the herd stood Orthrus. The hound was massive, its 2 heads snarling in unison, eyes glowing yellow, saliva dripping in ropes. Its bodies were thick with muscle. Its claws carved trenches in the earth as it approached. Beside it stood Eurytion, tall and savage, spear in hand, his voice a growl. "No thief takes Geryon's cattle," he said. "Not even you, son of Zeus." Hercules lifted his club. "Then you will fall before me." Orthrus sprang. Both heads lunged, fangs flashing. Hercules swung once, his club crashing against bone, shattering skulls in a single blow. The beast collapsed, twitching, its snarls silenced forever. Eurytion cried out in rage and charged. His spear thrust fast, but Hercules caught it, snapped the shaft like a reed, and drove the broken end through the herdsman's chest. Eurytion fell among his cattle, lifeless. The herd scattered in panic, bellowing across the island. But their cries carried farther than the fields. From the high cliffs came the thunder of footsteps. Geryon approached. 3 bodies walked as one. 3 faces glared with fire. 6 arms lifted shield and spear, sword and bow. His voice, when he roared, was threefold, a sound like mountains splitting. "You kill my hound. You slay my herdsman. You dare take what is mine. Then face me, son of Zeus," Hercules answered with silence, his grip tightening on his bow. The battle shook the island. Arrows flew, Geryon's bow loosing shafts like lightning, but Hercules' arrows, dipped in Hydra's venom, flew truer. One struck a shoulder, another pierced a thigh, another tore through a shield. Still the giant advanced, roaring, spears thrusting, swords flashing. Hercules leapt aside, his club swinging, smashing against helmets, breaking bone. One head reeled, blood spraying, another arm fell limp. But Geryon pressed on, his fury unending. The ground cracked beneath their struggle. The sea churned, waves rising high as cliffs. At last, Hercules drew a final arrow, knocked it, and aimed at the centre head. The string sang. The shaft flew true, striking deep through eye and skull. Geryon screamed once, a cry from 3 mouths, then collapsed. The giant lay still, his blood soaking the red earth. The cattle stood trembling, their eyes rolling, their breath hot in the cold air. Hercules gathered them, driving them into the sea, across the straits, back toward the lands of men. His journey home was long, marked by storms and ambushes, but at last he returned to Mycenae, driving the herd before him. When Eurystheus saw the cattle, he turned pale. Another labour complete, another triumph for the man he despised. But still Hera whispered, and still the king's voice twisted, "You will not rest yet. One more beast remains, the worst of them all. Fetch for me the mares of Diomedes. You have done so. But now," he leaned forward, eyes glinting, "now bring me the apples of the Hesperides, guarded by the daughters of night and by a dragon that never sleeps." The command of Eurystheus rang like mockery. "Bring me the golden apples of the Hesperides." Apples from Hera's own garden. These apples were no fruit of earth. They grew in the farthest west, beyond mortal sight, in a hidden grove tended by the Hesperides, daughters of night, whose voices sang like silver bells, and whose hearts hid secrets older than men. In the center of their garden stood the tree of gold, its branches heavy with shining fruit. But the tree was not unguarded. At its roots coiled Ladon, a dragon vast as rivers, with 100 heads, each whispering, hissing, shrieking without rest. It never slept. Its eyes glowed red through the endless night, and its coils wound the trunk until no branch was free. Even to speak of stealing the apples was sacrilege. They belonged to Hera herself. Hercules set out, knowing he might not return. He wandered far beyond the known world, through lands where the rivers ran black, where mountains cracked with fire, where the air shimmered with heat. He questioned kings and prophets, sailors and priests, but no mortal knew the way. At last he came to Prometheus, bound in chains upon a crag, his liver torn each day by an eagle's beak, his torment endless. With his club, Hercules struck the bird from the sky, shattering its wings, freeing the Titan for a moment's breath. In thanks, Prometheus told him the path. "Seek Atlas," the Titan said, his voice heavy with pain. "He holds the sky upon his shoulders. He alone may reach the apples, but beware, he carries cunning sharper than stone." So Hercules came to the place where the world ended. There stood Atlas, vast beyond measure. His body bowed, his knees bent, his shoulders braced beneath the dome of the heavens. Stars wheeled above him, constellations shifting with each strain of his muscles. His face was carved of stone, his arms trembling with eternity's weight. When Hercules approached, Atlas lifted his head. "Who dares disturb me?" "I am Hercules," came the answer, steady. "I come for the apples of the Hesperides. The world says only you can fetch them." Atlas's eyes glinted. "Then take the sky, son of Zeus. Let its weight fall upon your shoulders, and I shall fetch your prize." Hercules hesitated only a moment. Then he stepped forward, set his feet upon the rock, and lifted. The sky pressed upon him, crushing, endless. His knees bent, his back groaned. Sweat poured from his skin as stars burned above him. But he did not falter. Atlas straightened, rolling his neck, stretching arms that had carried the heavens since time began. For the first time in eternity, he was free. He strode toward the grove, laughter shaking the air. Hours passed, or days, or years. Hercules could not tell, bent beneath the cosmos, his bones screaming. Every heartbeat was a lifetime. His breath came ragged, his vision swam. Yet he held on. At last, Atlas returned. Apples gleaming gold in his massive hand. Their light shone like fire, their scent sweet as ambrosia. But Atlas did not hand them over. "Why should I return to bondage?" he said, smiling. "I will take these to Eurystheus myself. I will leave you here, Hercules, to hold the heavens forever." The weight pressed harder. Hercules' arms trembled, his chest burned, but his mind was sharp still. "You are right," he said, his voice calm. "The sky is heavy beyond bearing. But if you will hold it again only for a moment, that I may place a cushion upon my shoulders, then I will bear it gladly." Atlas, proud in his strength, laughed. "Very well." He took back the sky. Hercules straightened, rolling his shoulders. Then, with the apples in hand, he turned and walked away. Atlas roared, straining beneath the weight once more, but it was too late. The son of Zeus had outwitted the Titan. Hercules returned to Mycenae, golden apples gleaming in his arms. Eurystheus gaped at them, his mouth dry, his hands trembling. But Hera's gifts could not be kept by mortal kings. The apples were returned to the gods, set once more in the grove of night. The labour was done, but Hera's malice had one trial left. If Hercules could outwit Titans, if he could bend rivers, slay dragons and tame monsters, then she would send him where no living man had ever triumphed. To the underworld itself, to drag forth Cerberus, the three-headed hound of Hades. Eurystheus had grown desperate. Each labour he had set had ended in failure, not for Hercules, but for the king's schemes. The lion lay slain, the hydra destroyed, the stables cleansed, the birds scattered, the bull tamed, the mares subdued, the girdle seized, the cattle herded, the apples stolen. No beast, no trap, no land had broken the son of Zeus. So Hera whispered her cruelest task yet, "Send him to the underworld. Bid him bring back Cerberus, the hound of Hades." Alive, Eurystheus smiled with venom, for no mortal could descend into death and return. This was no labour. This was a sentence. Hercules made ready. He left behind a bow, arrows, sword, and club. For this task he was told no weapon could avail him. Only his hands, only his strength, only his will. He travelled to Taenarum, the cave where the earth gaped open to the underworld. Black winds howled from its mouth, carrying the stench of ash and rot. At its edge, shadows twisted like smoke. Hercules descended. The world of the living fell away. The air grew cold. The ground turned to ash. The light of the sun vanished, leaving only a dim glow, neither day nor night. Across the plain flowed the river Styx, black as iron, sluggish and endless. The cries of the dead drifted across the water, thin as whispers, countless as sand. At the shore waited Charon, the ferryman. His face was hidden beneath a hood, his hands skeletal upon the oar. "No mortal may cross," he rasped. But Hercules glared, his presence vast as storm. He struck the ground, the echo like thunder, and Charon recoiled. Wordless, the ferryman allowed him aboard. The boat drifted, the waters swallowing silence, the shades of the dead watching with hollow eyes. On the far shore, shadows parted. Hades himself stood waiting, his helm of darkness casting his face into shadow. Persephone silent at his side. "Why have you come, living man?" the Lord of the Dead intoned, his voice deep as stone. "I come by command," Hercules said, "to take Cerberus into the light." A murmur passed through the shades. Even the dead trembled at such arrogance. Hades' gaze burned. "Cerberus is mine. None may take him. But if you would try, then do so without blade or arrow. Subdue him by strength alone." "If you can." Hercules bowed his head. "So be it." Then came the growl. Low at first, then rising, rolling like an earthquake. From the darkness padded Cerberus, 3 heads, each larger than a lion's, eyes burning red, fangs dripping venom. His mane bristled like spears, his body massive, coiled with muscle. A serpent writhed from his tail, hissing, striking. His paws struck sparks from the stone. The hound of Hades, guardian of the dead. Cerberus saw Hercules and roared. 3 voices shook the underworld at once, and then he charged. The ground split beneath him. Jaws gaped wide, 3 mouths snapping, fangs flashing like blades. Hercules met him head-on, seizing 2 throats, forcing the heads aside, while the third lunged, teeth sinking into his shoulder. Blood poured, pain seared. Still he held. The serpent tail lashed, striking his leg. Poison burned his veins. Still he held. Cerberus thrashed, claws tearing furrows in stone, 3 mouths biting, snapping, slavering. The dead shrieked. The air boiled with sound. But Hercules roared louder. His arms locked tighter. His body strained against the impossible weight. Slowly, slowly, he forced the beast down, pressing it into the ground. The hound howled, 3 voices breaking into a single cry. The serpent writhed and fell still. At last, pinned beneath the son of Zeus, Cerberus lay subdued. Hades' gaze lingered. "You have done what no mortal could," he said, voice heavy as fate. "Take him. But know this, he will not remain with you. Cerberus belongs to the dead. You may bring him forth, but you must return him, or the balance of the world will break." Hercules nodded, blood dripping, breath ragged, and so he dragged Cerberus from the shadows, through the caverns of Taenarum, into the light of the sun. When Eurystheus saw the beast, 3 heads snapping, eyes blazing, body writhing, he shrieked and dove into his bronze jar, slamming the lid tight. "Take it back," he cried, muffled, trembling. "Take it away. Return it to Hades." And so Hercules did. He led Cerberus once more into the underworld, released him to his post at the gates of the dead, and returned alone. Thus ended the 12th labour. Hercules had faced beasts, men, kings and gods. He had bent rivers, slain monsters, walked to the ends of the world, and returned from the land of the dead. No labour remained, but Hera's curse was not broken, for strength could conquer monsters. It could silence dragons. It could even defy death, but it could not silence fate. And Hercules' fate was waiting. The 12 labours were finished. Hercules had faced lion, serpent, boar, bull, mares, birds, cattle, girdle, apples, and hound. He had walked to the ends of the earth, bent rivers from their beds, stolen from the garden of the gods, and entered the underworld itself. The people of Greece sang his name louder than ever. In markets and temples, his deeds were carved into stone, painted on pottery, etched into memory. Children played at slaying lions with wooden clubs. Kings sought him as ally. Women prayed for sons with his strength, but none of it filled the silence in his house. The laughter of his children did not return. Megara's voice did not come back to him. Each triumph, each laurel, each song was a crown of thorns, reminding him that no hydra's venom, no bull's fury, no hound's fangs had ever hurt him so deeply as his own hands. At night he woke sweating, fists clenched, ears ringing with echoes of screams that were long gone. He was free of Eurystheus, but not of Hera, and not of himself. Still, Hercules wandered. He roamed Greece and beyond, no longer bound by orders, but drawn by the cries of those in need. Wherever famine struck, he gave aid. Wherever a monster rose, he struck it down. Pirates who plagued the seas vanished beneath his fists. Tyrants who oppressed their people found their palaces broken to rubble. Some praised him as saviour. Others feared him as storm. For his anger was never far. His grief never healed. At times he drank deeply, seeking to drown memory, and in his cups his strength made him dangerous. At times he laughed loud and long, filling halls with joy, only to fall silent when memory returned. He was half a god, but half a man, and men carry wounds that never close. He sought love again, but love was never easy. Women of noble houses were offered to him, yet each union ended in bitterness or betrayal. Hera's hand moved unseen, weaving misfortune into his life. He sought refuge in temples, but the gods themselves were divided. Some praised him, Athena for his cunning, Apollo for his service, Zeus for his strength. Others, led by Hera, scorned him, whispering that his glory was stained with blood and madness. Wherever Hercules went, he was never fully at home. He was always passing through, always restless, always searching for something he could not name. Yet even in wandering, his legend grew. He joined battles not his own, turning tides with the weight of his arm. He stood with kings, yet bowed to none. He was mortal, yet greater than mortals. Divine, yet barred from Olympus. Bards told of his laugh, deep and booming, of his rage, sudden and terrifying, of his eyes, which could be kind as sunlight or cold as stone. And through it all, Hera watched. Every triumph stung her like a wound. Every song sung of Hercules was salt in her pride. She had tried to kill him in the cradle, in his youth, in his labours, and even in death's realm. Each time he had risen again. But Hera was patient. Fate is long, and she knew the end had not yet come. One evening, as the sun sank over the mountains, Hercules stood alone, his lion's pelt across his shoulders, his club leaning heavy against the earth. He gazed at the horizon, the air cool against his scarred skin. He had done what no man could do. He had survived what none should survive. Yet his heart was heavy still. Glory filled the world around him, but peace never came. He was Hercules, hero, killer, saviour, wanderer. A man torn between godhood and humanity, loved and cursed in the same breath. And though his labours were over, his fate was not. For Hera's hand had one final blow to strike, and fire waited. The years passed. Hercules, though scarred, endured. He fought, he wandered, he loved again, but peace never rooted in his life. Hera's hand, patient as shadow, still reached for him. In time, Hercules wed Deianira, a princess of Calydon. She was gentle and loyal, her love steady even when his moods turned dark. For a time, her presence softened him, as Megara's once had. But as with all things in Hercules' life, tragedy lurked. Years before, Hercules had slain a centaur named Nessus, who had tried to carry off Deianira. With his dying breath, Nessus had offered her a gift. His blood, he said, would ensure Hercules' love forever, a charm to bind his heart. Deianira, innocent, had kept it. She did not know his words were venom. She did not know the blood of a centaur, mingled with Hydra's poison, carried only death. Time wore on. One day, Deianira heard whispers that Hercules loved another. Her heart ached with fear. She remembered the gift of Nessus, wrapped away in cloth. In desperation, she dipped a robe in the blood, believing it would bind her husband's love to her forever. When Hercules returned, she gave it to him with trembling hands. "My lord, wear this." For me, Hercules, weary from battle, smiled faintly, trusting, and draped the robe across his shoulders. The fire began at once. Not flame, but venom, Hydra's venom, carried in the blood of Nessus, woven into the cloth. It seeped into his skin, burning deeper than any fire, eating through flesh, searing bone. Hercules roared, a sound that shook valleys, birds scattering from trees, the earth trembling beneath his fury. He tore at the robe, but the cloth clung, melted into his skin, fused with his flesh. The more he pulled, the deeper it burned. His body, once invincible, was undone. He staggered across the land, his steps gouging the earth. Mountains echoed with his cries. Rivers boiled where drops of his blood fell. His strength, which had crushed lions and subdued gods, could not tear free of this curse. Deianira, when she saw what she had done, fled in despair. Some say she cast herself into death, unable to live with her guilt. But Hercules remained, burning, screaming, the venom unrelenting. At last, he climbed Mount Oeta. His body was breaking, his veins fire, his skin ash. He knew the truth. This was Hera's final victory. But if he could not live as Hercules, he would not die crawling. He ordered a funeral pyre built, a great stack of wood upon the mountain's peak. With his own trembling hands, he climbed atop it, laying his lion's pelt beneath him, his club at his side. "Light it," he commanded. But his companions, grieving, could not. At last a wanderer, some say it was Philoctetes, stepped forward. With shaking hands he touched flame to wood. The fire leapt skyward. The pyre roared. Smoke curled to the heavens. Hercules lay upon it, his body racked with agony, his roar shaking the mountain one last time. The flames consumed flesh, but could not consume spirit. For Zeus looked down, and at last defied Hera. With lightning he struck, searing away mortal weakness, lifting his son from ash. Where the pyre burned, the body of Hercules was gone. But above, upon Olympus, a new presence stood, no longer torn by grief, no longer bound by curse. Hercules entered the company of the gods. His strength became eternal. His place was set among the stars. Even Hera, though bitter, at last bent to peace, and their strife ended in uneasy truce. Below, men remembered him not as victim, but as hero, his labours carved into memory, his name carried across centuries, his figure etched into stone and song. He had suffered more than any man. He had triumphed more than any hero. And though fate had burned him, fate had also crowned him. Thus ended the mortal life of Hercules, but not his story, for his name became legend, and legend never dies.